On a crowded street near a bus stop, an elderly man collapsed. Passers-by noticed but only averted their eyes. Some whispered he must be homeless. Others grimaced, thinking he was just another drunk. His worn-out coat hung like a sack. His boots were caked with mud, and his hat had slipped sideways, revealing his gray hair. No one reached out a hand. The crowd flowed past, some to work, some to the store, some staring into their phones. No one knew that this man was the owner of large companies, a millionaire who once a month would walk the streets in his late father's old clothes. He did it in memory of his wife, who had always feared he might lose touch with ordinary people. On this day, fate chose to bring him face to face with someone who would change both his life and his own. The boy's name was Jamal. He was only 16, but the spark of childhood innocence had long since vanished from his eyes. He grew up in a poor neighborhood, where every morning began with neighbors shouting, the smell of cheap fast food, and the wail of police sirens. His mother worked as a supermarket janitor, and his father had left the family back when Jamal had barely learned to walk. For him, school was a battlefield, not a place of learning. Teachers, worn down by endless lists of problem students, often overlooked those who stayed quiet. Jamal kept to himself. He came in, sat at the back, doodled in his notebooks, and dreamed about things that seemed impossibly out of reach. His only joy was his little sister, Keisha. She believed in him like no one else did. Every evening, Jamal read books to her, books he borrowed from the local library. Sometimes they dreamed together, about a house without a leaking roof, a fridge that was never empty, bicycles they could ride far beyond the borders of their neighborhood. Jamal was on his way back from the library when the old man fell. He carried a stack of worn books in his arms. He was searching for something useful for his future projects. The boy loved tinkering with broken things. He collected old radios, tried to bring dead phones back to life, and believed that one day this skill would help him escape poverty. The crowd parted, whispering, but no one stepped forward. Jamal stopped, frowned, clutching his books to his chest. In front of him lay the old man, his face lined with age, but his eyes clear, full of pain, and surprise at the indifference around him. "Hey, are you okay?" Jamal asked quietly. The man barely lifted his head but gave no reply. So Jamal set his books on a bench and extended his hand. His fingers were rough from work and street games, but there was so much sincerity in that gesture that the man couldn't refuse. He rose, breathing heavily. The crowd still watched from a distance. Someone even smirked. Someone else shook their head. But Jamal paid no attention. He brushed the dust from the man's coat and gently straightened his hat. "Thank you, son," the old man rasped. His voice trembled, but there was strength in it. Jamal only nodded. To him, helping was natural. He didn't know who the man was. It didn't matter whether he was rich or poor. He simply saw someone who had fallen and picked him up. The old man studied him for a long moment, as if memorizing every feature, every movement. Jamal, embarrassed, grabbed his books again and turned to leave. But the man suddenly spoke, "You are different." The boy didn't understand the meaning, shrugged, and walked away. He had no idea that this simple gesture, an outstretched hand, would become the turning point of his life. When he returned home, the same gray walls greeted him, the peeling paint, and his tired mother coming back from her shift. He helped her clear the empty plates from the table, sat next to his sister, and began reading her a book, as if nothing special had happened. Yet deep inside, Jamal felt the day was unusual. It was as though the city itself whispered to him that something greater awaited ahead. And that evening, the old man, whom everyone had mistaken for a homeless beggar, sat in his luxurious home on the outskirts of the city, still wearing that shabby coat. He could not forget the eyes of the teenager, the only one who had reached out a hand. The next morning, the elderly man woke earlier than usual. His thoughts kept drifting back to that moment when a stranger, just a boy, had reached out his hand. He could have allowed himself to forget it, as he had forgotten hundreds of other fleeting encounters, but something inside refused to let go. His name was Mr. Howard. Outwardly, he looked modest, gray hair, weary eyes, plain clothes. Yet behind this humble appearance was a man who had once built a network of enterprises and become a legend in the business community. He could have worn expensive suits, surrounded himself with people eager to flatter and agree. But over the years, he had realized luxury distances and loneliness grows. That day, he went to the office. A massive building of glass and steel gleamed in the sunlight, reflecting the clouds. At the entrance, employees bowed slightly, rushing to please. Every glance, every smile carried a hidden calculation. But Howard saw through them all. "Good morning, Mr. Howard," one of the top managers beamed. "I hope you had a wonderful evening." "I did," he replied curtly, walking past. In the conference room, partners were waiting. The discussion was harsh. Some proposed cutting staff to boost profits. Others insisted on shutting down a branch in a poor district of the city. "It's unprofitable," one director argued. "We're losing money. Keeping that branch open is pointless." "Hundreds of people work there," Howard noted coldly. "For them, it's the only source of income." "But we're losing millions," another burst out. "You yourself taught us to count numbers, not emotions." Howard's gaze grew heavy. He could not stand when his words were reduced to sentimentality. He knew how to be strict and principled, but in recent years, he had felt the business world growing ever more cynical. "We will keep the branch," he said firmly. The room fell silent. No one dared object, but dissatisfaction hung thick in the air. More than once, people had hinted that his methods were outdated. To them, he was a relic of the past, not a guide to the future. After the meeting, a young investor approached him, smug and overly confident. "Forgive my bluntness, Mr. Howard," he said, "but perhaps it's time you thought about handing over affairs to more modern hands. People value profit, not charity." The old man fixed his gaze on him. In that instant, the face of the boy with the books came back to him. The sincere look, free of self-interest. "You are mistaken," he answered quietly. "People value a hand extended in a hard moment, even if they don't yet realize it." The investor smirked but said nothing. That evening, back at home, Howard sat for a long time in the chair by the window. He watched the city lights and recalled his own path. Once he too had been nobody, running the streets, searching for work, enduring humiliation. But he had a mentor, someone who had once believed in him. Now, he had met a boy who reminded him of himself. The next day, he went out again in that same old coat. And again, he heard the whispers behind him. Vagrant. Drunk. Look, there goes that crazy old man again. People laughed, turned away. Someone even shoved his shoulder as they passed. But he walked calmly. What mattered was seeing people's reactions without masks. He saw indifference, disdain, cruelty. And in that indifference, he felt the city's true face. Later that day, he had a meeting with former colleagues, men he had once raised to the top. Now, they spoke behind his back, saying the old man was losing his grip. "He's not the same anymore," one said. "He should leave before he drags us down with him." "Once he was a legend," added another, "but times change." Howard entered the room and heard their words. He didn't move until they noticed him. The silence grew heavy, like lead. "Legends," he said slowly, "do not die. They simply wait until the world remembers who they are." He turned and walked away, leaving them in awkward silence. Deep down, he knew ahead lay not only a battle against the cynicism of colleagues, but also a confrontation with the city itself, a city that judged by clothes and appearances. And he felt certain his path and the boy's path would cross again. Several weeks passed. The city carried on with its usual bustle. Noisy streets, blaring sirens, crowds of people rushing about their business. But for Mr. Howard, those days had become a time of trials. He went out more and more often in his old coat, and each time the reaction of those around him was the same: contempt, indifference, mockery. One evening, he stopped by a small store on the outskirts. He only wanted to buy bread and milk, but his appearance raised suspicion from the cashier. The girl frowned at the sight of his wrinkled wallet and called the security guard. "Keep an eye on him," she whispered. "He looks homeless." The guard, a young man in uniform, walked over and roughly grabbed Howard by the elbow. "Are you here to buy or to steal?" he snapped. Howard looked him calmly in the eye but said nothing. He pulled out a bill and laid it on the counter. The cashier still rolled her eyes, as if she were ridding herself of an unwanted customer. "Hurry up and leave," she muttered. Howard walked out, swallowing the bitterness. Once again, he was reminded how easily the world branded people with labels. But the most serious trial awaited him later. One night he was walking home on foot. He liked wandering the empty streets, listening to the sounds of the city without the crowd's noise. Suddenly, he heard shouting and commotion around the corner. A group of teenagers ran past, and moments later, a police car appeared. Its headlights caught his figure in the shabby coat. "Hey, stop!" a voice shouted through the loudspeaker. He raised his hands, but the officers were already out, surrounding him. "What are you doing here?" one barked. "Robbery? Drugs?" "I'm just walking home," Howard replied calmly. But his words carried no weight. In their eyes, he was nobody, just a homeless old man. One officer shoved him against the wall, while another searched his pockets. "He's got a wallet," one said, pulling out the leather case. "Maybe he stole it." Howard felt anger boiling inside, but outwardly he stayed cold. "That wallet is worth more than your annual salary," he said quietly. The officer smirked. Yeah, they all say that." At that moment, Jamal was passing by. He was returning from the library as before, with books in his hands. Seeing the scene, he recognized the old man. Without thinking, he stepped closer. "Hey, wait!" he shouted. "This man isn't a thief." The officers turned toward him. "And who are you?" one demanded. He helped me once. And I know he's not what you think," Jamal stammered, but his voice was firm. The officers exchanged glances. One smirked, the other waved dismissively. "Fine, old man, get out of here before we change our minds." Howard straightened his coat, took his wallet, and looked at Jamal. Their eyes met. In the old man's gaze flickered gratitude, and something more, determination. After that incident, he understood the situation had gone too far. If even the police saw him as nothing but a vagrant, it was time to change things. The next day, a scandal broke out in the office. One of the directors reported that their boss had been detained by the police. The rumor spread instantly. Subordinates looked at Howard with suspicion, as if he truly had become what the streets claimed he was. "This undermines our authority," one manager complained. "How will people respect the company if its head wanders the streets like a beggar?" "We can't risk our reputation," added another. Howard listened in silence. But inside, his decision was already made. He would no longer simply observe. The time had come. Meanwhile, in the poor neighborhood, Jamal told his sister that evening how he had seen the old man again. The girl listened with wide eyes. "You know, Keisha," he said quietly, "that man isn't as simple as everyone thinks." He had no idea how right he was. After the incident with the police, Howard understood. The moment had come. He could no longer remain in the shadows, silently watching as the world judged people by their clothes and appearance. He made a decision to repay the boy who, without hesitation, had once reached out his hand. He spent the entire night in his study by the fireplace, shuffling through old papers. Among them were contracts, records, notes about people he had once helped. Yet none of those cases had touched him as deeply as Jamal's act. The next morning, Howard sent his driver to the neighborhood where he had met the boy. He wanted to know everything: where he lived, with whom, what he did. It took the driver only a few hours to return with the information. "His name is Jamal Rivers," he reported. 16 years old. Attends the local school, but his grades are low. His mother's a cleaner, works nonstop. Father left long ago. There's a younger sister. They live in an old house with a leaking roof. Almost no money at all. Howard was silent for a long while. He had suspected as much, but hearing it aloud was harder. "Prepare the car. We're going there," he finally said. Meanwhile, Jamal was walking home after school. In his hands, The same library books in his head, heavy thoughts. Once again, kids had mocked him. One pointed at his worn sneakers, others joined in. The teachers pretended not to notice. "Hey, Rivers," one boy sneered. "Why do you drag those old books around? You'll be a janitor anyway." Jamal clenched his teeth but said nothing. He was used to it. Only at home could he relax a little, help his mother, read to Keisha, daydream about the future. When he approached his house, a black car was parked at the curb. A tall driver in a suit stood beside it. Jamal froze. The old man stepped out, in the same shabby coat, but this time his face shone with determination. "Hello, Jamal," he said. The boy was startled. "You... again?" "I need to speak with you and your mother," Howard replied. They entered the house. A narrow room, an old couch, peeling walls. All of it seemed even poorer in the presence of such an unexpected guest. Jamal's mother, surprised and wary, immediately tried to apologize for the mess, but Howard stopped her with a gesture. "You have a wonderful home," he said gently. "What matters is that there is warmth here." At first, the conversation was strained. The mother didn't understand why a wealthy old man, she had already guessed he was no ordinary passerby, was interested in her son. Jamal sat silently, not knowing what to do with his hands. Finally, Howard spoke plainly. "Your son is special." He didn't walk past when everyone else turned away. "And I want to give him a chance." "A chance?" his mother asked cautiously. "Yes. Education, mentorship, an opportunity to become something more. But for that, I need your consent." The mother looked at him for a long time, then turned her gaze to Jamal. "Are you sure this isn't some kind of trick?" she whispered. Howard smiled. "I can show you documents, bank accounts, anything you wish. But that's not the point. The point is that your son has already shown who he truly is." The next day, Jamal's life changed. That same black car pulled up for him at school. His classmates spilled outside, staring in shock. "Hey, Rivers, is that your grandpa?" One of them jeered. Jamal didn't reply. Inside, he knew a new stage was beginning. But he also understood it would spark envy, hatred, new problems. Howard took him downtown, to a massive office building buzzing with life. There, he introduced Jamal to his assistants, only to be met with cold stares. "Sir," one manager whispered, "are you really planning to waste time on this boy? He's from the ghetto. They don't change." "You are wrong," Howard replied firmly. "He will change. And with him, so will we." Those words only heightened the tension. Some already saw Jamal as a threat, an outsider suddenly standing beside the boss himself. Others thought it was just an old man's whim. Jamal felt it all. He saw the sideways glances, heard the whispers. But he also felt strength beside Howard, and for the first time in his life, he wanted to prove he was worthy. That evening, he returned home exhausted but inspired. His sister listened wide-eyed to his story. "So, he wants to help you?" she asked. "Yes," Jamal said softly, but it's not just help, it's a test." He understood. Ahead lay a struggle against distrust, envy, prejudice. But deep within him burned something new, something he had never felt before, the belief that he could become someone greater. Rumors spread faster than the wind, at school, in the neighborhood, even among neighbors. Everyone was talking about how Jamal had gotten into a rich family, how he now had a patron. Some were envious, others mocked, and some expressed open hostility. "He thinks he's better than us now," classmates hissed behind his back. "Let him try to act high and mighty. We'll bring him down quick." But the strongest envy festered inside Howard's office. Managers who had spent years flattering the boss in hopes of promotion now saw a skinny teenager from the ghetto sitting at his side. At one meeting, Jamal sat quietly in the corner, trying to absorb every word, to understand the charts and tables flashing on the screen. But one director mocked him deliberately. "Maybe we should ask our young specialist's opinion," he sneered. The room erupted in laughter. Howard slowly lifted his gaze. "You laugh in vain," he said coldly. "Yesterday, this young specialist asked me a question none of you could answer. The laughter died, but the tension only grew. In Jamal's neighborhood, things were worse. On the street, a group of older teens confronted him. Their leader was Derek, a notorious bully who loved humiliating the weak. "Well, Rivers," he said with a smirk, "got yourself a new daddy? Riding in cars, wearing suits now?" "That's not true," Jamal replied calmly. "Not true?" Derek shoved his shoulder. "You betrayed the neighborhood, you hear? Think some rich old man took you in, so now you're king?" The others laughed. But deep inside, Jamal felt something new. They were jealous of him, and that feeling was dangerous, because jealousy could turn into hatred. Meanwhile, inside Howard's company, a conspiracy was brewing. Several board members gathered in secret. "The old man's losing his mind," one said. "Think about it. He's dragging some street kid into our world." "What's next?" "He's preparing to hand the business to him," another added, "and we'll be left with nothing. We need to act before it's too late." They devised a plan. Discredit Jamal, paint him as a thief or a fraud in Howard's eyes. All it would take was one scandal, one setup. One evening, Jamal stayed late at the office. He was studying economics books Howard had lent him. The halls were quiet. Suddenly, he noticed Howard's office door slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of him. He peeked in and saw two managers rummaging through the safe. They hadn't noticed him, too focused on their work. "Hurry, before anyone sees," one hissed. "We'll slip this into the kid's backpack, and that's it. Case closed." Jamal's heart pounded. He realized they meant him. He stepped back quietly, trying not to make a sound, but the floor creaked. The men spun around, their eyes met. "Damn it!" One lunged for the door. Jamal bolted, footsteps and curses chasing him. He burst outside and nearly collided with Howard, who had just arrived. "What happened?" the old man demanded sharply. They were trying to set me up," Jamal gasped. At that moment, the two managers emerged, their faces composed and innocent. "Sir," one said smoothly, as if just discovering the situation, "we caught this boy at your safe. He was inside." Howard looked from Jamal to them. Silence hung heavy in the air. "I'm not lying," Jamal cried, his voice trembling. "It was them." Howard said nothing, but a fire burned in his eyes, a fire that unsettled even the hardened directors. "Tomorrow morning we'll convene the board," he said quietly, "and then we'll see who's telling the truth." That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He feared Howard wouldn't believe him, that everything would end just as it had begun. He remembered his mother's warning, "Never trust rich people, they always use the poor." But deep inside, he felt Howard was different. Meanwhile, the conspirators prepared their next move. They were sure that even if the old man hesitated, a scandal at the board would destroy Jamal's credibility. But they underestimated one thing. Howard knew how to wait, and how to test people. The morning brought tension. The entire office buzzed with rumors. In the boardroom, all key figures gathered. Jamal sat beside Howard, fists clenched tight. One director spoke first. "Sir, last night we caught your protege at the safe. This is a serious violation. We believe he does not deserve your trust." Another chimed in. "We tried to stop him, but he fled. This is a dangerous precedent." All eyes turned to Howard. He rose, sweeping the room with his gaze. His voice was cold, steady. "I installed cameras in that corridor myself, and this morning I reviewed the footage." The managers turned pale. The recording clearly shows who was rummaging in the safe. He turned to Jamal. "And you? Not only did you not run for help, you tried to handle the situation yourself. That speaks volumes about your character." Silence fell over the room. The conspirators said nothing, realizing their plan had failed. Howard sat back down. "Remember this. This boy has more honor than many of you in this room." But the story didn't end there, because now envy and hatred had turned into open confrontation. And Jamal still had many trials ahead. After the failure with the safe, the conspirators realized simple tricks wouldn't achieve their goal. Howard was not as naive as they had hoped. He trusted cameras more than words, and now he had openly declared that he stood on Jamal's side. The scene at the board meeting was explosive. Some employees felt respect for the old man and his protege, but others only seethed with anger and fear. Those involved in the conspiracy knew they were under suspicion, but instead of retreating, they chose to strike harder. That evening, Jamal walked home through his neighborhood. His heart was heavy. Even the victory at the board brought him no relief. He felt eyes on his back, heard neighbors whisper. People didn't believe in miracles. They thought he had sold out or become a rich man's pawn. At his building, Derek and his gang were waiting. "Well, hero," Derek said, blocking the entrance. "You got bodyguards now, or are you your own boss?" "Step aside," Jamal answered calmly. "And if I don't?" Derek smirked, shoving him in the chest. "Think riding in some old man's car makes you better than us?" Jamal didn't answer. He just looked at him in a way that made Derek falter. But then someone from the group shouted, "Hey, he's got books. Let's see what he's hauling around." They snatched his pile of worn textbooks, pages scattered across the dirty pavement. Jamal knelt, gathering them, ignoring their laughter. Inside, though, his resolve hardened. He would never again let anyone take his future from him. Meanwhile, the conspirators moved to their next step. They knew removing the boy directly was impossible. Howard was too watchful. So they chose to strike at his weakest point, his family. One of them contacted a corrupt local policeman. For a bribe, the officer agreed to search Jamal's home. "Say there are drugs," the cop sneered. "In neighborhoods like that, people always believe it." A few days later, early morning, loud knocking shook their apartment door. Jamal's mother woke in fear. Keisha cried out. A commanding voice came from outside. "Police! Open up!" Jamal ran to the door, his heart pounding. He saw his mother's trembling hands as she tried to shield his sister. When he opened it, uniformed men stormed inside. They tore through closets, overturned belongings. "What are you doing?" his mother screamed. "There are children here." "We got an anonymous tip," one officer replied coldly. "This apartment is suspected of storing illegal substances." Jamal couldn't believe it. They ripped at the wallpaper, ransacked drawers, as though searching for something planted in advance. Sure enough, one officer found a bag of white powder, clearly staged. "Here's the evidence," he declared. "Kid, you're under arrest." "This is a lie," Jamal shouted. "That's not mine." Neighbors crowded the hallway, whispering, "See, I knew something was off with that boy." Others stayed silent, suspicion in their eyes. As they led Jamal away, his mother sobbed, and Keisha reached desperately for him. The news spread instantly. At school, in the neighborhood, even in Howard's office, people gossiped about the boy's arrest. "We told you," some employees gloated. That kid from the ghetto is no different from the rest. But Howard stayed silent. To him, it was too obvious, too crude. He sent his lawyer and a private investigator to dig deeper. In the police station, Jamal sat in a cramped cell. His head throbbed. His heart tore apart. He remembered the day he had helped the old man and thought, was it all for nothing? Will they really crush me like this? But another feeling grew inside, anger, determination. He knew that if he gave up now, it would all end. But if he endured, maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. Meanwhile, Howard stood in his office by the window. The city buzzed as always, but he saw only one thing: how the world once again tried to crush those too weak to fight back. "They think I'll back down," he muttered, "but I'm an old lion, and I won't leave him alone." The next morning, Howard's lawyer entered the precinct, followed by Howard himself. His presence sent whispers rippling through the station. "Release the boy," Howard ordered firmly, "and those who planted the evidence will soon be sitting in court." The officer who had found the packet turned pale. He hadn't expected the old man to push this far. When Jamal saw Howard, for the first time in days, he breathed freely. He understood. He wasn't alone. But greater trials still lay ahead. The conspirators had not yet played all their cards, and now the game was turning deadly serious. After the incident with the police, it became clear. The confrontation had entered an open phase. Howard understood the conspirators would not back down. They had crossed the line of no return. Planting drugs on a boy, that wasn't intrigue anymore. It was war. Jamal, during those days, felt the world closing in on him. At school, he was greeted with jeers. "Hey, did you hear? Our genius is a drug dealer now," someone shouted. Others stayed silent, but their looks said it all. Even if he was innocent, the stain of scandal would never fade. In the neighborhood, it was worse. Derek and his crew now had ammunition. "Well, Rivers," Derek said when they met on the street, "the old man bailed you out, but everyone knows the truth. You're one of us, and dirt doesn't wash off." Jamal clenched his teeth but stayed silent. He knew every word in reply would only fuel the fire. Meanwhile, Howard began to act. He hired private investigators to gather evidence against the conspirators. But they were more cunning than he had expected, using intermediaries, fake documents, money routed through shell companies. "They're professionals," the detective reported. "They cover their tracks so well, it's nearly impossible to pin them down." "Every mask falls eventually," Howard answered. "It's only a matter of time." One evening, he invited Jamal to his home. The mansion, with its high gates, manicured gardens, and vast halls, seemed like another world. Jamal had never seen anything like it. "They want to break you," Howard said, peering at him over his glasses. "But strength isn't in fists or money. Strength is being yourself when everyone around screams you're nobody." "But they hate me," Jamal whispered. "At school, on the street, even in your company." "Then you're on the right path," Howard said firmly. "When you climb higher, there will always be those who want to drag you down. And if you fall, no one will reach out a hand, except those who truly believe in you." Jamal said nothing, but fire burned in his chest. At the same time, the conspirators devised a new plan. If discrediting him had failed, then he would need to be removed physically. But doing it directly was too risky. Howard had guards watching every step. "We'll do it through others," one director said. "Let his friends from the neighborhood take care of him." So Derek was handed money and a hint that a small job could earn him more than his family had ever seen. A few nights later, as Jamal walked home late, 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Derek was among them. "Well, superstar," Derek sneered, "time to teach you a lesson." They surrounded him. One held an iron rod, another a knife. Jamal realized this wasn't a scuffle, and it was an ambush. "Step aside," he said firmly, hiding his fear. "And if we don't," Derek smirked, "no one will notice if you disappear." At that moment, headlights cut through the darkness. A car pulled up, scattering the boys. A guard stepped out. "Quick, get in!" he shouted. Jamal jumped inside. The car sped off. "That was close," the guard said. "You need to be more careful." When Howard heard about the attack, his face darkened. "So they've decided to play big," he said grimly. "Fine. Then I play without mercy." He gathered his trusted people. Files, reports, photographs spread across the table. "We'll strike them where they think they're untouchable," he said. "Their money." During those days, Jamal felt torn apart. On one side, school, where he was humiliated. On the other, the street, where he was hated. And now, even his life was threatened. But deep down, he sensed all of this was a trial. Every evening, he sat with Keisha reading her books. She looked at him with the same unshaken trust. "You'll be someone great," she said one night. "I know it." Those words became his anchor. Soon, strange things began happening in the city. Several companies tied to the conspirators suddenly faced inspections. Their accounts were frozen, contracts canceled. Some partners refused to work with them. They quickly realized Howard was behind it, but they had no proof. "The old man is going all in," one muttered, "but he's dragging the boy into this. If we don't stop him, he'll destroy us." So they chose their final move, to strike at the heart. One evening, as Jamal returned home, he noticed the door to their apartment ajar. He stepped inside and froze. The room was overturned, books scattered, belongings tossed everywhere. His mother sat on the couch, clutching Keisha, tears streaking her face. "They came," she whispered. "They said if you don't leave the old man, we'll all regret it." A chill ran through Jamal. He understood now. Things were more serious than he had ever imagined. The room still smelled of fear as Jamal tried to comfort his mother and sister. The intruder's words echoed in his mind. If you don't walk away from the old man, you'll regret it. He knew the threat was real. But what was he to do? To retreat meant betraying himself. To continue meant putting his family in danger. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Keisha's breathing as she clung to him in her sleep, searching for protection. His thoughts circled endlessly. Maybe I should leave. Maybe go back to my old life. Then, they'll leave us alone. But in his chest burned something else. The fire Howard had lit in him. The fire that told him he had no right to give up. In the morning, he went to see Howard. The old man immediately noticed his pale face and weary eyes. What happened? Howard asked. Jamal hesitated, but then told him everything. About the men who had broken into their home, his mother's tears, his sister's fear. Howard listened in silence, fists clenched. When Jamal finished, he said, "This is my fault. I pulled you into this war." "No," Jamal shook his head. "They chose this path themselves. But I can't let my family suffer because of me." Howard rose and walked to the window. His silhouette in the morning light looked unshakable. "Your family's under my protection now," he said firmly. "I won't let these jackals intimidate you. But you must decide for yourself. Will you see this through to the end?" "I will," Jamal answered without hesitation. The next day, guards appeared outside the Rivers home. Black-tinted cars idled nearby. Men in suits stood watch in the yard. Neighbors whispered, some envious, some spiteful. But Jamal didn't care. He saw only his mother's relief and Keisha's smile as she stepped into the yard, unafraid for the first time in weeks. But protection didn't stop the conspirators. Now, they turned to public opinion. A city newspaper ran an exposé. Ghetto teen manipulates billionaire. Sympathy or scam. The article hinted that Jamal was using the old man's pity, that his family was profiting, and that he was involved in shady dealings. At school, the mockery rose again. "Hey, you're in the paper," a classmate shouted, waving a copy. "Soon they'll make a movie about you, how to get rich through pity." Even the teachers looked wary. Some seemed to believe the news. Others just didn't want trouble. Jamal clenched his jaw. He had learned not to answer taunts, but inside, his fury was building. When Howard heard about the article, he summoned his lawyer. "They want to destroy his name," he said. "But a name can be cleared. Truth is stronger than lies." "Truth?" The lawyer smirked. "In this world, truth is whatever shouts the loudest." But Howard was resolute. He decided to give Jamal the chance to answer for himself. "Tomorrow you'll speak at a school assembly," he told him. "In front of the teachers, the students, the parents. Say what you believe. People need to hear your voice." "They won't believe me," Jamal objected. "They will if they see your sincerity. And if they don't, then they're not worthy of your words." The day of the assembly became Jamal's trial. The auditorium was full. Teachers filled the front rows. Parents whispered among themselves. Students waited for drama. Jamal stepped onto the stage. His hands trembled as he held his notes. Then he set them aside. "You've all read what the papers say," he began. "That I'm a fraud, that I'm using the old man. But you don't know who I really am." He spoke of his childhood, of his mother working nights to feed them, of reading books to Keisha under a cheap lamp, of the day he reached out to a man everyone thought was a homeless stranger. "I didn't ask for a reward. I just did what I thought was right. And now they call me a liar, a criminal. But I know one thing. I'll never stop helping people, even if the whole world is against me." Silence filled the hall. Some looked away, some were lost in thought. Then the history teacher, an older man, stood and said, "This boy deserves better than mockery." His words sparked applause, at first hesitant, then louder, until even those who had whispered cruelly about Jamal the day before were clapping. But across town, the conspirators watched the broadcast grimly. "He's turning everything against us," one muttered. "As long as the old man's alive and standing by him, we can't touch him," another replied. So they made a decision that would change everything. Strike not at the boy, but at Howard himself. That night, lights burned late in Howard's mansion. An anonymous message had arrived. If you don't give up the boy, tomorrow will be your last day. Howard crushed the note in his fist and said aloud, "Then tomorrow, the war truly begins." The night was tense. Howard barely slept, though outwardly he remained calm. He knew too well the weight of threats. Behind them stood people who did not waste words. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. It was no longer just about his business or reputation. It was about life itself. By morning, security around the mansion had been reinforced. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Cameras tracked every movement. Yet Howard understood. If the enemy chose to strike, walls alone would not stop them. Jamal arrived that same day. He noticed the unease in the guard's eyes, though Howard greeted him with his usual restraint. "You knew this could happen?" the boy asked once they were alone. "I knew," the old man nodded. "And in this world, you always pay for the truth. But if they kill you—" Jamal's voice trailed off, his heart pounding. "Then you'll continue," Howard said calmly. "I see myself in you when I was young. You'll reach where I no longer can." The words burned inside Jamal. He couldn't bear the thought of losing this man. Howard had become more than a mentor. He was the father Jamal had never had. Meanwhile, the conspirators moved forward. They knew openly attacking a billionaire was risky. But creating a situation where he seemed defenseless, that was possible. They staged an accident. Howard's driver was bribed to veer off route at the right moment. The plan: masked thugs would stop the car, making it look like a random robbery. But at the last moment, the driver faltered. He couldn't betray a man who had always treated him with honesty and respect. Instead, he confessed to the security team. "They're planning an attack, sir," he said, trembling. "Forgive me. I took the money, but I can't go through with it." Howard only nodded. "You made the right choice. Now they'll try something else." That evening, as Howard and Jamal returned from a business meeting, their convoy was ambushed at an intersection. Several cars blocked the road, masked men leaping out. Gunfire erupted. The guards reacted instantly. The armored doors sealed. Bullets pinged against the metal. Jamal pressed himself to the floor of the seat, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. "Don't move," a guard shouted. Howard sat motionless, eyes blazing with cold fire. "You see, Jamal," he said over the chaos, "this is the face of fear. They fear us more than we fear them." Within minutes, the police arrived. The attackers fled, though some of their vehicles were captured. Within an hour, the news was everywhere. Unknown assailants attempt assassination of prominent businessman. The next day, Jamal witnessed how the conflict had escalated. The office buzzed with panic. Some employees voiced support for Howard. Others whispered that he's dragged us all into a war. "We need to cut ties with the boy," one director shouted. "It all started because of him." Howard rose and said firmly, "It didn't start because of him. It started because of your greed. The boy is just the mirror that shows you your true selves." His words fell like a verdict. But the conspirators knew. The open attack had failed. They would have to strike more cunningly. That evening, Jamal returned home. His mother sat by the window, staring anxiously at the street. "I'm afraid for you, son," she said. "You've stepped into something you don't understand. These people won't stop." "I'm afraid too," Jamal admitted. "But if I back down, they win. And then they'll come for us again." She embraced him, and for the first time Jamal realized he was no longer a child. He had made a decision that changed everything. A few days later, a new trial struck. The news reported, billionaire and his young protege suspected of charity fund fraud. Documents, evidence, everything looked convincing. The conspirators had poured money into falsification, bought off media, and now public opinion was against them. "They want to destroy us in people's eyes," Howard said, "but this is our chance. If we prove the truth, they'll lose everything." "How?" Jamal asked. "We need to find the weak link. There is always one who will betray the others for his own gain." But in the shadows, the danger grew. The conspirators knew time worked against them. If Howard gathered proof, they'd end up in prison. Then we must eliminate him for good, one of them said, and the boy too. So they began planning something far more ruthless than anything before. That night, Jamal sat by his window, gazing at the city lights. I can't just survive, he thought. I have to win. For Mom, for Keisha, for him. After the failed assassination attempt and the fiasco with forged documents, the conspirators realized they had to strike hard and strike everywhere at once. They understood that as long as Howard stood by the boy, Jamal had protection, and as long as Jamal had his family, he was vulnerable. The plan was simple: hit both fronts at the same time, the old man himself and the Rivers home. Jamal felt the storm closing in. At school, he noticed strangers watching him. Near his house, suspicious cars appeared and vanished at the sight of guards. His mother once again paced nervously by the window, while Keisha, though trying to be brave, no longer played outside. They won't leave us, Jamal said one evening, sitting beside his mother. Maybe that's enough, she whispered, exhausted. You're too young to be fighting in an adult war. I'm afraid one day you won't come home. Mom, he answered, if I back down, they win. And then they'll come for us again. I have to see this through. She said nothing, but her eyes flickered with pride and fear. Meanwhile, in Howard's office, heated discussions raged. He gathered his closest circle and showed them folders of evidence his private investigators had uncovered. Here's the proof, he said. These people have been bleeding the company for years, signing fake contracts, funneling money through shell firms. But if we make this public, one lawyer warned, they'll stop at nothing to destroy us. They already stop at nothing, Howard shot back. Yesterday they threatened the boy and his family. Tomorrow they'll try to kill me. That was the moment he decided. It was time to go on the offensive. But the conspirators struck first. That very evening, 2 attacks unfolded at once. The first, at Howard's mansion. As he returned home, the gates suddenly jammed shut. Headlights flared, several cars blocked the drive. Armed men emerged. Gunfire erupted. Howard was inside with his guards. He watched bullets shatter glass. Masked men stormed the gates. It seemed only a matter of time before the walls gave way. The second, at the Rivers apartment, masked intruders broke down the door. Jamal's mother screamed, clutching Keisha. Jamal, just back from the library, rushed forward. Let them go, he shouted. They grabbed him. He fought so hard it took 2 men to hold him. One pressed a knife to his throat and hissed, Tell the old man, if he doesn't step down and give you up, next time, they won't wake up. Then they vanished as quickly as they had come, leaving chaos and terror behind. Later that night, Howard and Jamal met at the mansion, already swarming with police. Both faces were grim. They attacked you too? Jamal asked. And you as well, Howard nodded. Now, they've declared open war. They threatened my sister, Jamal said quietly, eyes blazing. I'll never forgive them. Howard placed a hand on his shoulder. Anger is a poor advisor. But if you learn to channel it, it becomes strength. We must be smarter. The next day, Howard made a public statement. He gathered the press in a grand hall and declared, Yesterday, both I and my family, as well as my protege and his loved ones, were attacked. These crimes are the work of a group of men who have hidden within my company for years. I promise you, the truth will come out, and the guilty will face justice. The news shook the city. Alongside support came new pressure. Company shares plummeted, investors demanded answers, employees split into factions. And the conspirators, seeing Howard had not retreated, realized they had to strike harder still. Meanwhile, Jamal returned to school. He knew the rumors had spread already. Classmates eyed him as an outsider, but now with a tinge of fear. That's the kid they shot at near the mansion, someone whispered. His family's under guard. Must mean he's mafia, another muttered. But Jamal no longer lowered his head. He walked forward with clear eyes, knowing he had no right to be weak. That evening, sitting with Keisha, he said, You know, I used to think everything would change if you just reached out a hand. But now I understand. You have to keep holding it, even when the world tries to break it. The girl nestled against him and whispered, I'm not afraid when you're here. And those words became his new strength. But in the shadows, the conspirators were preparing their masterstroke. They would combine every weapon they had, legal traps, fake evidence, another attempt on Howard's life, and the collapse of his company through bribed partners. And Jamal would find himself at the center of the storm, not just as a witness, but as a fighter, with life itself at stake. The city held its breath. The conspirators launched their final, most powerful strike. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's empire collapsing. Ghetto teen just a pawn in a dirty game." On television, forged documents were shown, supposedly proving that Howard and Jamal had siphoned money through fake charities. On the streets, people argued. Some believed the accusations, others insisted on their innocence. Company stock plummeted, partners pulled out of deals, and at the same time, the conspirators prepared one last assassination attempt. Armed men were to storm the mansion and end it once and for all. But this time, Howard was ready. His detectives had found the weak link, the very director who had joined the criminals only for money. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he broke down and confessed. The video of his testimony was sent to the press and spread across every channel faster than the conspirators could react. It was them, the trembling man said on camera. They planted drugs, staged the attacks, paid off journalists. It was all to get rid of Jamal and force Howard out. The effect was electrifying. People who had doubted only yesterday now saw the truth. A wave of support swept over both the company and the Rivers family. Newspapers changed their tone. Old man and teen were victims of a dirty plot. But the conspirators weren't finished. Their plan had collapsed, and now they turned to brute force. That night, a group of armed men advanced on Howard's mansion. They didn't know they were expected. Security had doubled. The police had been tipped off. As the attackers climbed the fence, floodlights blazed from every side. Shouts rang out. "Police! Weapons down!" The attempt was crushed. The conspirators were arrested, their names plastered across headlines. Men who had once sat in boardrooms, smiling at meetings, now sat in handcuffs, surrounded by cameras. When it was all over, Howard and Jamal stood together in the mansion's garden. The night was quiet, street lamps casting soft light across the paths. "You see," Howard said, resting a hand on his shoulder, "truth always comes to light. You just have to weather the storm." "But if not for you," Jamal began. "No," Howard interrupted. "If not for you, I've lived a long life and seen more betrayals than I can count. But that day on the street, only one boy reached out his hand. You." Jamal lowered his eyes, warmth rising in his chest. Weeks passed. The company recovered, its stock climbing again. Howard officially announced a new program to support talented teens from poor neighborhoods. And the first on the list was Jamal. At school, everything changed. Those who once mocked him now looked with respect. Teachers no longer ignored him. Derek and his crew made sure to keep their distance. Jamal's mother got a new job, no longer cleaning but working in the office of Howard's foundation. Keisha finally had the chance to attend a good school, and Jamal himself became more than a billionaire's pupil. He began working with documents, studying business, sitting in on meetings where real decisions were made. People marveled at how quickly he learned. One evening, as he and Howard sat by the fireplace, the old man said, "You know, I have no heirs. One day everything I've built will pass to you. But money and companies, those aren't the most important. What matters is never forgetting the day you lifted me off the ground." "I'll never forget," Jamal whispered. And indeed, he never did. At night, as the city fell asleep, he still read books to Keisha. Only now, their home was bright, warm, and safe. He understood. The road ahead was long, the trials not over. But the most important part was done. He had proven to himself and to the world that a kind heart could change destiny. Thus, the story that began with a simple gesture, an outstretched hand on the street, ended in victory. A victory over greed, over fear, over betrayal. And now, the boy from the poor neighborhood stepped into the future, knowing a very different life awaited him.